Ciao ludzie, hello people. It's time to mix some languages again, and on today's menu we've got writing systems with more diacritics than letters, languages that are literally on opposite sides of the globe, and countries that have almost nothing in common except being neighbors to bigger countries who are also a bit pushier. Today we are meshing together Polish and Vietnamese, or as I like to call it, Polomies, or maybe Vietnolish, I haven't decided yet. Now, believe it or not, there's already a real-life connection between the two. Vietnamese people make up one of the largest immigrant communities in Poland, a legacy from the good old Soviet era. And if you squint hard enough, Poland and Vietnam actually share a bit of historical trauma. Poland got wedged between Germany and Russia, and Vietnam is stuck with China and European colonialism. So yeah, both countries know what it's like to be the little weak neighbor. The first link I could find between a Polish person and Vietnam goes way back, 1634 to be exact. Wojciech Męcicki, a Jesuit missionary who set foot in southern Vietnam and stayed for almost a year. He was one of the first people to document Vietnam in Polish. Now, Jesuits weren't just converting people to Christianity, they were also massive language nerds. Around the time Wojciech was exploring Vietnam, other Jesuits, mostly Portuguese and Italian, were creating what would become the modern Vietnamese alphabet. But what if Polish Jesuits had taken the lead? What if the Vietnamese alphabet had been built with more whiz, shiz and zhiz? Welcome to our alternate history. First up, we are redesigning the Vietnamese alphabet, but making it more Slavic. Yeah, I know, the modern Polish alphabet wasn't exactly finalized back then, but this is old history and in my world it existed. Here's a picture of a proposal for the Polish alphabet in the 16th century if you don't know what I'm talking about. To build the Polomies alphabet, I took some modern Polish letters and the current version and reverted some decisions the Italians made. I reverted writing GH for words with G, because in Italian the letter combination GI doesn't sound like G but G, Giovanni. Also, I added some Polish letters like sh and ch. Yes, it's arbitrary, but that's how all alphabets are, except Hangul, which is perfect. In general, I tried to make it a rather phonetic alphabet with one letter, one sound, focused on southern Vietnam as that's the area the first missionaries entered. For spelling all the Polish words, I added j and w and on for nasal sounds and merged sh into s and c. I didn't want to burn you all with 10 different S sounds and tones, but yes, we are keeping tones. For vowels, I wouldn't change much except fusing Y and I into E and relabeled I pronounced, I as Y, just like it's written in Polish. Now that I have bastardized the Vietnamese alphabet, let's bastardize it with Polish vocabulary. The Polish missionaries decided to stay in Vietnam after creating the alphabet because they fell in love with the culture, food, and saw it as their duty to teach them about Catholicism. Thus, they wanted to settle there. As the missionaries weren't really popular in non-Catholic Southeast Asia, they fled to the island Con Dao. There, they could live safely and continue their duties. As Con kind of sounds like Polish koń, which means horse, they basically started calling the island Wyspa Koni, Island of Horses. They opened a monastery where they mainly taught reading and writing. The settlement around the monastery was called Nowe Konin after the city of Konin in Poland. Well, obviously not in Polomies, in that language they call it Nov Koń. So yes, we are using Vietnamese as a basis with Polish influence and not the other way around. Because I like the challenge of reducing Polish words to one syllable. Also, fuck Polish grammar. Oh yes, I didn't mention it, every Vietnamese word has only one syllable. That's why Poland is called Ba Lan and Nowe Konin Nov Koń. Obviously, the first words the Vietnamese people would start using from Polish would be words for new things that they didn't know before. For finding out what words would be borrowed, we can look at real-life examples of French words in the Vietnamese language. Autobrut, autobus, fromage, fromage, cheese, chocolat, chocolate, café, coffee. As our scenario starts more than 2 centuries earlier than French influence on Vietnamese, more words would have been borrowed. Let's start with a few classics. Food is always a great place to start, so the first Polish word sneaking into everyday Polomies, definitely things like żurek. But instead of keeping the full word, the locals would probably cut it up like they do with all words. Żurek, where ek, just like in Polish, works as a diminutive or adjective meaning little or cute. Same thing with zupa, soup. Vietnamese already has soup, So in Polomies it would become zup. But it's not just food. Let's move into other areas. Let's take the Polish word krzyż, cross, becoming krzyż, for example. It wouldn't just mean the religious symbol in Polomies. Over time, the meaning would stretch maybe to intersections. Droga, road, becomes drog, and książka, book, well, Vietnamese has kuyen sak, but Polomies turns it into kuyen książ, where kuyen is a classifier for books which we are keeping. If you want a little notebook, add the diminutive ka ending, and you've got książka, little book. Does having ek and ka give the word gender? Well, maybe. Personal pronouns are messy in Polish and Vietnamese, so in Polomies they are simplified. We take ja for I and ty for you from Polish. Wy and my, two Polish words, might become an exonym for the Vietnamese and an endonym for the Polomies people. Also, Vietnamese has a lot of pronouns for different relationships between the speaker and the listener, whereas Polish uses the word pan pani, similarly in the second person, politely. Thus, we'll be replacing ang chi and ong ba with pan. Also, third person singular becomes on. Alright, let's dive into the spicy part, grammar. So, like I said before, Polomies grammar stays mostly isolating, just like Vietnamese. That means no conjugation, no declension, and no cases. But I couldn't resist sprinkling in some Polish flavor. For sentence structure, we are keeping the SVO subject-verb-object order. Ja jem sera, I eat cheese. Doi an fo ma, Vietnamese equivalent of that. And in Polomies, it would be ja an ser. The tense particles. I really love Vietnamese tense particles, too much to give them up. So, da, dang, se, stay. Ja, da, an, ser, I ate cheese. Ja, dang, an, ser, I am eating cheese. Ja, se, an, ser, I will eat cheese. Negation. Here's where we add more Polish. Instead of the Vietnamese I grabbed nie, inspired by the Polish nie. Ja, nie, an, ser, I don't eat cheese. For yes-no questions, Vietnamese uses ko, but we'll do it like Polish. Polomies questions start with chi, borrowed straight from chi. Chi, ja, an, ser, do I eat cheese? And for classifiers, like I said earlier, I kept classifiers because they're such a big part of Vietnamese grammar. So if you're talking about objects, you'd still use a classifier like con for example, animals, or kai for things like clothes. But obviously they might change too. Plurals, Vietnamese doesn't really do plurals unless you use nhung or kak, and Polomies does so too. Adjectives stay postnominal after the noun like in Vietnamese. Książka, little book, ser star, old cheese. And for particles, I imagine over time some Polish particles sneaking in, like że, that for connecting clauses. Ja da nie wiem, że on la mot nuoi mąż. I didn't know that he's a man. Also, let's add no, well, as a filler word, as I have had full conversations using it in Polish. No, tak to jest. That's it for grammar. Now an example. I first thought about a famous Vietnamese poem about Poland, link in the description, which was too difficult, so I just translated these few sentences. Ja tik an jur ek. Kontrok dan den klas. On dang dok książ. Noi mąż tik sup. Czy ty muon kiełb? Czy pan muon kiełb? Ja di prom den lond, nai mai ja se di den novcoin. Unka da unka was ksiądz. And that's already it. I hope you learned a bit about Polish and Vietnamese. See you next time!